Hey ratbags, it's Jade with a TECHTONICA guide today. Lots of tips and lots of things I wish I knew sooner. TECHTONICA is a great game and there's no set way to build your factory. We're all going to be taking it in different ways, and as you progress you'll unlock different technology. But there's definitely some things I wish I knew earlier after putting about 50 hours into the game so far on Xbox Series X and PC. So if you find this video useful, please leave a like, check out the rest of my content, and let's go. It's so obvious, I hate even saying it, but do keep track of your Victor terminals for progression. A lot of the tiers and items that you'll need, you may come across scannables, you may find that you can actually unlock them, but you can't actually craft or do anything with them. That's because your Victor tiers are still lagging behind a bit. So if you've seen bottlenecked, the stuff that you just don't realise how to get or get hold of, then keep following the main missions at the Victor terminals and basically fulfill what they ask for. You can see normally the kind of resources that you're going to need to unlock that tier on the left hand side. So things like the Shiverthorn buds or the seeds, and then you've got the coolants, and then you've got that lantern here. And then you're kind of bottlenecked by how many of the research cores that you'll have, which we'll talk about later. And then later tiers, well, they're definitely tied towards the progress of your fulfillment at the Victor terminal. There is another late game terminal you might find, the elevator, where you have to dump a bunch of resources as well. But in the main, it's the Victor terminal that you're going to be spending most time dumping resources into. If you've got a lot of advanced technology but you can't seemingly get to that tier yet, well then you've obviously spent a long time exploring and maybe not enough time fulfilling the main missions. That applies to power as well, as pretty much every piece of technology is going to require either research cores or the right amount of power to be generated for you to go ahead and unlock. Also be careful if you go ahead and decide to deactivate any of your research. You get the ability to swap what you want to research later on. So if you need some more blue research cores, well, you can deactivate something and then go and activate what it is you want. But if you're missing some of the other requirements, like maybe the power, then sometimes it wouldn't necessarily be able to be activated again until you had the right power consumption back up. But definitely utilise that ability to reassign your cores and unlock that technology as fast as you can. Obviously for me the focus is about making your factory efficient and actually getting resources, so going for stuff that will unlock new smelting technology, new mining technology. That was the most important to me, rather than maybe just equipment to help me get around the map a bit more, or slightly cosmetic stuff like certain lighting. So the TECHTONICA map is fairly large and it can get a bit confusing once you start finding all of these doors or objectives about where to go back to them, as the thumbnails aren't that great, but they actually show a list on the compass. You might have to click it on and off sometimes, there's a bit of a bug, and then it should show up as a white box on the actual compass itself. It's so tiny, I didn't realise this for absolutely ages, so don't make the mistake I did and waste loads of time getting lost in the caverns trying to find that doorway that you've now got the resources to go and unlock. Check the compass regularly and make sure anything's flicked on or off. In the cavern, just where you have got the Victor terminal, you should find this data pad, and this will give the opportunity to get beacons, which can also obviously help. These can be crafted then placed, and they'll act just like the white boxes for doors that they'll show up on your compass. Pretty much all structures that you place also show up on the minimap, and I found this much better and easier to utilise. Putting lights down in caverns as you go will keep a track of where you've been and where you haven't. If you notice a lot of green blocks off the map seemingly, well obviously that means you're going to have to go and dig for them, as that will be loot, usually boxes of stuff or maybe the remnants of some ore. And I wish I knew this earlier, because I didn't see that there was a ton of resources you can get from some of these boxes, as well as future technology. This one's off the beaten path a bit, and you may need things like landmines to actually dig down so you can access some of them. But you're able to get Mark II technology like assemblers, smelters and drills much earlier if you go digging around. Check out my TECHTONICA secrets guide for more locations about where to find all of that good stuff. So you've done the tutorial, you're now setting up your factories. Always give yourself enough space. I often found that I confined myself too much, and this meant I had to redo a bunch of stuff later. Especially maybe leave space for running your own biochips, the fuel that is the most efficient for helping power your furnaces as well as your drills. That's why your drills have 3 holes in them, as they're meant to give one of them for the auto fueling. Now I had this system set up originally, and then I deleted it because I kind of felt it was a bit messy, and instead I've just been relying on dumping my bricks in, which was a big mistake. It's worth investing in the time so that once you are mining limestone and combining it with plant matter, you've got the biofuel bricks and they're going towards the machines that need it, so you never have to stop and start or wonder why something has stopped producing. Couple caveats with that though. Later on, the Mark II drills, they don't require any fuel as long as they're on a power floor, so that is something you might not necessarily have to go and put the lines all the way to, but your furnaces will always need some sort of fuel. Don't forget also you can dig around the ores so that you're left with just a huge big cube of either copper or iron, meaning that you can place more drills around the sides of them if you want more space or you really want to get more out of it, or place drills on top of each other on top of platforms. You honestly won't need more than maybe 4 to 5 of the regular tier 1s, and then once you get to the second stage drills, probably only 3 of the tier 2 to accomplish most of the objectives in a reasonable time. Like sure, more's already better, but if you spend too long making certain things, then you're going to be delaying everything else. You see that little flash I just did there as well? That's by right clicking in the right stick. In case you hadn't realised, I'm not too sure what it is on keyboard. That will show everything what is being made in that production, either assembly or being cooked in a furnace. I would say divide your resources. Ingots are probably obviously the main currency, that's how you're going to be crafting everything. You want a good amount of them to be going into run-off boxes for later use in your factories, and then the rest of it you want to be making the basics. Iron cogs, iron frames, copper wire, copper frames, you want some of that to be made in abundance. These can be set up pretty close to where obviously you've got your ore being made, and it's a good little line, and these really don't need to be touched, whereas the rest of my factory I chopped and changed a bunch of times. Now you're always going to hit bottlenecks depending on what technology you're using. Normally the drills, even the tier 1s, will kind of cap out at 250 because they're simply too fast for your regular inserters to take the ore out. And once it hits that 250 limit, it will then slow down slightly, hence why you see it may be going from green to yellow. That's pretty obvious. You'll upgrade your inserters and you can get the fast rapid ones, but you're not necessarily needing them always. You can see here with this regular tier 1 drill, I only actually need one fast inserter and the other two are just basic, and that is keeping the amount or the flow going. So don't automatically assume you need to upgrade every single piece to keep getting maximum efficiency. It depends on the technology. So test to see if it goes green or if it's going yellow. And of course, if it's red, then yes, you've got a problem. It's either run out of fuel or it's hit its max limit. All Mark II technology pretty much doubles the speed or the output of the items that you're pretty much crafting or making. Also, I find it's better to have run-off boxes acting as your junctions rather than going directly onto conveyor belts. This way you've always got a safety catch to store up any excess materials you're making. So for this example, I've got way too much ore going into that box, and if that was going straight onto conveyor belt, then it would start bottlenecking everything else. But because it's inside the box, it's slowly filling up, giving me more time to make sure that I'm getting the rest of my factories set up, and you can run multiple conveyor belts to all the other parts. In fact, I advocate having run-off boxes in between every kind of function. So between the drill and the smelter, and then between the smelter and assembly, I always try and have a box. One thing I definitely wish I knew earlier was having lots of the smelters or furnaces. In fact, you want at least 2 to maybe even 3 to 1 ratio against drills. So that means for every drill that you have, at least have 2 smelters connecting the ore that's coming out. The smelters take a long time, and even with upgrades and the tier 2 ones, it's still going to take a while. You've always got so much ore left over by the time you get really advanced. So don't focus on making too many drills, instead make sure you've got plenty of smelters. The last thing about run-off boxes is it's easier to divert resources to different directions with this as well, rather than laying complex networks of the conveyor belts. I've got my assemblers making cogs and the metal frames, and if I have too many of them, well then all I have to do is go ahead and remove an inserter or two, and that will slow down the process of some of them ingots being diverted to these assemblers. As you can see, I've got tons and tons of these resources, and at one point I had like 4 inserters taking up every single ingot. But like I said, you might need some of them ingots for much more advanced stuff later. So utilize the boxes with your conveyor belts to control the supply of ingots to where you want to go. There are some components or resources you're always going to need just tons of. Obviously ingots are the main lifeblood of the game, so that's pretty obvious. And the beginning of the game and the middle of the game kind of takes you through stages where it's asking you to make a bunch of one thing, but it doesn't mean you should stop once you've done it. So early on you need a lot of copper wires for a lot of the production, so that should be something you focus on rather than copper components in the beginning stages. And I would say actually you need more of the copper stuff than you need iron in the early game. But then you need cooling systems, and these are going to require a bunch of stuff that you get from your crops. You're always going to need thousands and thousands of these, as these craft your research cores, the later ones. The copper wire is used for the purple, and then the cooling systems are used for the blue. So they are two of the major resources. I would always say make sure you've got plenty of factories building them. And then next up is plant matter frames. In fact, I would place this after the copper piping as one of the most important things you should start crafting, because you need it again for so much. Crop growing was something that I was a bit slow in getting on, and you definitely need a lot of the stuff, but you do find you'll end up with a whole bunch of things like the shiverthorn buds or maybe the kindle vine extract. They will all come in handy, you'll need them for sure. I would say though maybe 3 to 4 of the crop growing items, that's pretty much all you need, and then a couple of freshers to dismantle, and then another couple of freshers to go ahead and make that into the extracts that you'll need later. Absolutely make sure you've got a self-seeding system for your crop plots, as they do take a bit longer to grow, and I would say the ratio for these is about 2 to 1 for freshers. So for every kind of 2 planters you've got, you probably only need 1 fresher. And from there you can connect 1 fresher to 1 fresher ratio, and that should be more than enough to get the bunch of resources that you need for especially your crops. At the moment there's only 2 things that you can actually plant, so you don't need to worry about having loads of planters spare. Just focus on the shiverthorn and the kindle. Now you are going to need a ton of the shiverthorn extract to make the coolants, and then you're going to need a ton of the kindle vine extract to go ahead and mix to make adamantium ingots eventually. But for a while you are going to have a bunch of that stuff just kicking around in storage, so make sure you've got plenty of boxes to keep it. It won't be till much later that you've got more of a use for that kindle vine extract to combine it. So yeah, you definitely need lots of space to store all the excess. So in the early stages I would work on kindle vine first so that you can get the plant matter frames, but then put aside all that kindle vine extract, and then maybe focus a bit more on the shiverthorn so that you're making coolant, which will contribute to the cooling systems. Monorails can be great, and I do kind of wish I'd set them up a bit earlier. It would have saved me going back and forth between my main hub area and obviously where I'm mining my adamantium. It's much quicker and easier to actually place these than setting up a floor and then conveyor belts. However, they're quite expensive to make in the early days in terms of the resources you need, especially when you're trying to generate other stuff, and they require a lot more power. So really check what the upgrade requires and whether or not you're close to it with your accumulators and your power banks. I'd say it's probably a good idea to really maintain a lot of your factories and production in the same main hub area, rather than needlessly going to other areas just because it's got some ore and then diverting everything there. The exception to that is the adamantium, which you will only find in other places. So it can be a good idea to have your monorail set up by the time you get to adamantium, ready to transport all that kindle vine and the shiverthorn extract over to your adamantium processing area to make the ingots here instead of the other way around. Another thing you really should make sure you've got a good amount of factories making is processor units. These I often run out of in the early stages, so always keep these running and going as much as possible, and of course they do rely on plant matter frames. A lot of the doorways that you'll find to the facilities that give you more advanced technology, they're going to be locked behind a lot of the coolant systems and the processor units. That's why you need such an abundance as well. Never stop making the pink research cores. You'll know now that you advance the blue ones and they'll unlock further technology, and they require some of the pink ones. So obviously even if you've got an abundance and you've bought every technology with the pink cores, you're going to need more to go ahead and make the blue ones. I did have 2 or 3 factories set up making the purple cores at first, but then obviously I reduced it down to 1 once I started getting to the blue stage. But yeah, don't go ahead and dismantle your purple ones or make the purple factories into just blue research factories, as you still need them purple cores. So obviously placing your cores down means that you've got now the currency to go and buy whatever unlock you want from Tech Tree. The composers keep everything nice and neat and they'll stack it up. Now at the moment you can go ahead and get cluster bonuses once you get the technology for it, and that can be generated by having 10 of the purple cores or 5 of the blue cores. As long as they're placed down anywhere, you'll get bonuses that you can then turn on, like smelting bonuses or assembler bonuses eventually. There are 5 of these core boosts that eventually you'll be able to unlock, and they increase the speed by 0.25 or 0.5 by every cluster that you have. So it doesn't matter if it's a purple cluster or a blue cluster, it still contributes to that score. So this will really start to speed stuff up by the time you unlock this future technology to increase the efficiency of everything you're doing. But the game does have some changes in store. At the moment, you get these bonuses whenever you've got any of the clusters just placed. Remember, you can't use these clusters unless they're placed. They don't actually contribute to your final score if they're just sitting in your inventory. Obviously the composers are there for that reason, to stack them up nicely, but in the future that's the only way you'll get these core cluster bonuses is if your cores are on composers. So don't do what I did and delete a bunch of your cores, freeing up some space for the rest of your factory. You may have to think a bit more carefully about where you put your composers. You're probably better off putting it in another maybe area, or using this as the main core function and setting up another area as your main actual factory hub. At the moment it isn't implemented, but the devs have said a bunch of times in Discord, which I've spoken about in another video, that they are going to be implementing this in future updates, that you'll only be able to get them core bonuses if they're on composers. So I'm going to probably have to go up there and delete all of these by hand and then replace them in composers eventually. Obviously power's really important, and I maybe should have mentioned this a bit sooner, but you should have found the accumulator room in the Victor terminal. It's just in a small cavern to the side that you can dig through, and it pretty much will give you more than enough power if you fill it with more accumulators. So utilise what's there. It's already got the power floor pretty much there. You can expand it a bit, and it's already got some of these accumulators that you can utilise once you've scanned all the broken ones. So just fill up the rest of the spot and connect the rest of your factory in the main cavern to this area. You will need even more than this to really carry on powering stuff up, especially when you start adding things like the monorail system. You will find technology that reduces the amount of power that gets used by certain technologies, but for a good while it will be important to make sure you've got enough accumulators to store all that excess power. You might have big lines of cranks running, and obviously you're getting annoyed at having to turn it on every 5 minutes. Well, that's obviously where the water wheels come in. But some crucial things you need to know. You can have lots of water wheels and you can have lots of cranks associated with it, but they're only powering 2 of them cranks efficiently. You can have 1 water wheel and 20 cranks connected all in one line, and it looks like it's all being powered, but actually if you take a look at the actual cranks themselves, the power ends up getting spread. It's basically not producing as much. So you have to have the ratios right. But effectively, if you have more than 2 cranks per water wheel in tier 1, then you're not generating the maximum amount of power. So you can have them cranks either side, it doesn't matter. So if you've got 5 water wheels, then that means you can have 10 regular tier 1 cranks attached, either on the left or the right hand side of the wheels. But that changes once you get the tier 2 cranks. You're going to need 2 water wheels powering 1 crank. And if you mix up the cranks to the water wheels, this can also dilute the power. If you only have 1 water wheel and 1 tier 2 crank, that's generating 400 kilowatts, so half the power that it should do if you was doing it by hand. Whereas if you've got 2 water wheels, it's going to generate the full 800 kilowatts per crank. So something I wish I knew a bit earlier, because I just assumed that because the lines all looked like they were running, they were all generating the amount of power, but nothing was really going up. Also, it might be a bit too late by the time you're watching this video, but try and build your factory high enough that you can actually get a floor of these cranks running underneath. You kind of want your factory above so that it's kind of matching the steps of Victor, giving you plenty of space if you did want to make a super hub all in one area, or you can use the waterfall cavern where it's already got some of the ancient technology set up like I showed you earlier. If you've been really cost efficient, you don't need power floors underneath every single piece of your crank. It only needs to be touching one of the cranks, and that will keep the power generating towards your accumulators as long as they're on the same power floor. Later you'll get access to copper pipes that will basically, or power cables, you can connect from one hub to another, and this will keep generating power. However, these connectors here, they dilute the power again until you get more technology that reduces that. So you have to be careful in setting up too many hubs. That's why I think it's better to have it all in one spot. And whatever you do, don't start building huge lines of the power floors connecting them. It'll just take so long and it's so resource intensive. You're better off just waiting until you can actually get the copper cables to connect areas. Obviously, it's more efficient to dig a straight line towards where you want your power to go, but you can still take advantage of the riverbeds and the caves, as that will save you having time to dig through. Also, never really dig through unless you've got a bunch of the coolant as well. It's really tedious waiting for your mole to actually stop overheating. And then yeah, once you've got the technology and you're reducing the amount of output that is being wasted, then sure, start connecting up your copper cables. Although at the moment on Xbox it does look like there is a slight glitch or bug where sometimes the power's maybe not being transferred, so until that gets resolved you may need to resort to the power floors if you've got factories everywhere. While you're at this facility in the actual waterfall or water wheel area, don't ever go and pay any of the resource costs to get inside this room, because you can actually just break in through the hole that's in the roof above. Shout out to Rambo Robbie for that one that I had missed for ages. And finishing off, rehashing a little bit what I showed you guys in my lantern guide. I didn't realise that you had to put the ore inside a thresher, and then it gives you a powder which you then combine with that kindlevine extract to make the ingots. This took me ages to realise. I was assuming I would just have to put the ore through a smelter, or maybe some of the technology in the tree. That's what I was going to require to go ahead and be able to smelt the actual ore. If you can't actually smelt the ore in your thresher, it doesn't have the option, then you might need to dump enough of the raw ore inside the Victor terminal to unlock it. It's like rule 101 in any crafting, factory or survival game. Craft one of absolutely everything and run through items in every kind of production to see what it generates or what it makes next. You should get enough of the actual ore itself at Lantern by using the mining charges, and later on once you get more powerful mole you might be able to accrue some there. You also find some in storage boxes as well, and then you're left by the time you've dug it all out with just this Atlantum ore on its own. This is obviously what you're going to need to do with tier 2 drills to go ahead and mine. It does look like this does eventually run out. The one that I've got at the moment is starting to get a bit smaller or a bit more cracked. So you probably will have to look around on the mini map or the map to see if there's any more weird green kind of boxes or green marks everywhere, as this will mean that that is either a box of loot or it might be the beginning of a ore vein of Atlantum. Now you'll realise when looking at your terminals they've got ports that you can actually connect up so that you've got your items being directly delivered to get to the next objective. And this can be good if especially you've got a lot of resources going. But in the early days I would actually use a runoff box just to start accumulating the stuff that you need for the next objective. Why? Well, you'll notice that sometimes you need thousands of something and you might be actually locked behind a resource that you just haven't got the technology for yet. In the early days, a lot of it's to do with the ingots, so why would you want to dump thousands of your ingots inside a terminal if you can't actually make progress until later? You could be using them ingots for other technology or making more factories. So don't dump anything inside the terminals until you've got all the resources in one go. It's just a little bit of advice from me. It's just more efficient to keep more factories running until you've got everything ready to be crafted or being made before putting everything inside. It's a minor tip, but I still think it's worth and it's valid. Don't dump stuff in until you've definitely got everything needed. And that's pretty much it in terms of what I wish I knew. I've still got a bunch of tips that I'm going to go through, probably more early game stuff or just talking about all the different kind of factories you can build to help you get more efficient. But hopefully that has done you good. Let me know if it has. If you've got any tips that you really think should be told to the world, put it in the comment section down below. Look out for more live streams from me playing TECHTONICA, my new favourite addiction. Until next time, ratbags, I will catch you later.